And just like we all thought, but not really, the Carolina Panthers are 7-6 heading into the bye week and are within striking distance of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the NFC South crown. This is the Processing Blue podcast where we process blue for you. I'm Charlotte Observer beat writer Mike Kay, and I'm joined by the Charlotte Observer's resident Panthers historian and columnist, the wonderful Scott Fowler. On this episode of the podcast, we will discuss the biggest win of the David Tepper ownership era, Bryce Young's fifth-year option, Ejiro Evero's matrix of improvement, and go through the final stretch of 4 games. But before we do that, let's check in on the columnist. Scott, how are you doing today?
I'm well. Yourself?
You know, hanging in there. I haven't spilled coffee on a laptop yet, so we're off to the races.
I did that once. It's actually what I did was, I don't know whose fault this was exactly, but back in the late 90s, I was next to the previous beat writer who would like to put a 40-ounce Diet Coke open. They had huge cups back in the day in the Panthers press box, and right between our two laptops, I managed to knock it into his laptop, fried it completely, and so I feel your pain on that.
Yeah, that's a tough beat, literally. But you know what isn't a tough beat? The Rams have lost to the Carolina Panthers in Charlotte within the last few days. And I think I left everybody on a cliffhanger the last time I was on the podcast. You guys filled in for the aforementioned spilling of the coffee on the laptop last week. And I commend you for filling in 2 weeks in a row with Alex now covering a NASCAR trial. I told everybody that I didn't feel good about the 49ers game, but I thought that they might have a chance against the Rams. And listeners have brought that up to me on social media pretty repeatedly since the Panthers beat the Rams. But I've got to admit to our listeners who might not read all of our articles, I wimped out after the 49ers game. I was like, there's no way they're going to beat the Rams. So I don't deserve any kudos. I don't deserve anything. But my logic, Scott, before the game was, every time this team has faced a team that Vic Fangio and the Eagles have faced, Evero's had a really good plan, and they've been very opportunistic against the opposing offense. For those who don't know, the Eagles and Vic Fangio run a very considerably comparable defense to what Evero runs. Evero is a former Vic Fangio pupil. And so I think what's interesting kind of about all of this is they were able to be opportunistic. They win the turnover battle. The offense becomes opportunistic and, you know, kind of riverboaty, right? Riverboat Ronnie
For sure.
on 4th down, and they're able to deliver, not because they were the better team than the Rams, but because they out-risked and really like forced the opportunity as opposed to the Rams, who were very passive. Scott, what's your takeaway from this whole game?
I thought they had to play perfectly almost to win this game coming in. And like you, I mean, all three of us ultimately picked the Rams in our little predictions, and all of us missed it. And I think if they played 10 times that the Rams would win 8 or 9 of them. But I thought the Panthers had to do it pretty much exactly right. You know, the way Villanova did it against Georgetown in the 1980 whatever championship game. I mean, you just had to have a great game plan and a great game. And you had to have 3 turnovers, you know, forced compared to 0. And all of that happened. I mean, it was really, I thought, almost unfathomable, especially after the Rams scored so quickly on that first drive. And it looked like, Maher, we're in for another Buffalo or New England type route. And instead, kudos to the Panthers. I did not see that coming. I thought it was one of the happiest times I've probably seen the stadium in the last decade. I mean, it felt like the 2015 team a little bit, very joyous, some sort of, I can't believe this is happening stuff. I mean, scoring twice on 4th downs. Like you said, you know, I think they're now, Mike, they are maybe tied for first in the NFL with most successful 4th down conversions this year. They have gone for a ton. And when you score on those, just a remarkable, really week for them, and a great time to go in off the bye. What were your main takeaways?
Well, so I think we still don't know what this team is. I still don't think we know what this offense is. I think if you probably polled people internally, they wouldn't necessarily disagree with either one of those statements either. They're figuring it out. But what I do think is apparent and where there is conviction is I think Dave Canales knows who he is as a head coach, and he knows what he wants to get out of an offense. And I don't think he executes properly all the time with his play calling, but I think they showed when they can run and not just run for big gains, but run for on like trying to think of the word, like in sequence plays. So they're running for 4 yards and they're running for 3 yards, and then they get optimal third downs, and then they make plays whether they complete them or not, and then they go for fourth downs and they go vertical. I think this team wants to run the ball effectively, and not just for big plays, but to get chunks and chunks. And that's where Chuba Hubbard comes in, who looks like 2024 Chuba Hubbard again. And then they want to go vertical off that. So they don't want to just set up the pass with the run. They want to set up the vertical pass with the run. And if they can continue to maintain that momentum and continue to push the ball downfield, I think that could be very effective for their offense. Defensively, Matthew Stafford did what Matthew Stafford does. He threw to Devontae Adams in the end zone for 2 touchdowns. They ran the ball effectively. But I think what the Panthers did was they out-executed in big spots. They got what they needed when they needed it. Remember, 2 of those turnovers created at least 10 points of opportunity for the Panthers. They took away a red zone trip with the tipped ball that became an interception for the first interception of the game against Stafford. And then the pick 6, obviously, that was a true 7 points there off the turnovers. Or this game would be much different. This was a 3-point game, and that early interception cost the Rams at least 3 points. And so...
Right, as did the last, they were in field goal range, don't forget, on that last drive. If Stafford just throws that ball away, I think it was 3rd and 10. If he manages to get rid of that, they kick a field goal, it's 31-all, and then Bryce has a chance, to go score again, but it certainly could have been headed for overtime. I mean, I just still am marveling, honestly, that they won that one. That's just not the Panthers I'm used to seeing over the past 8 or 9 years. They found a way to blow those things over and over. And so to win that does leave me a little hopeful for the future, I'll say.
Yeah, I think this team knows that it's not talented enough to coast ever, right? Like
let's hope so. Yeah.
They're good enough to beat some contenders. They're good enough to be in playoff position entering the final month of the season. But they're also not good enough to beat every, bottom feeder in the league. We saw that when they lost to the Saints, for instance. It was very close against the Jets. And so I think where you find conviction is in being opportunistic and understanding that you have to win in the margins, and you have to create plays that alter the talent pool. When before the game, I was on the field for my TV hit with Channel 9. It started to rain and it got cold, and I tweeted out, that typically favors unpredictability and weirdness. Well, nobody's more unpredictable or weird than the Carolina Panthers, and that really stems with their quarterback. And so I wanted to have a discussion about Bryce Young's 5th-year option, which will be due, I believe, the first week of May. They have to make that decision by May. They don't have to make the decision before that, so there's still 4 weeks to kind of figure out and analyze what to do. According to Over the Cap, that option will be valued at roughly $26.5 million. To put that in perspective, Brock Purdy, on his long-term deal, makes $53 million per year, like on average, twice that amount, to give you perspective. Here's the thing about the 5th-year option. It's different. It's advantageous by different positions. Some positions, it doesn't make a ton of sense because you got a 1-year deal for a pass rusher making a ton of money. But quarterbacks, because they are paid so much and for so long, a 1-year deal worth $26 million puts that quarterback under Baker Mayfield. It puts him under Sam Darnold. It puts him under Brock Purdy, as mentioned. It puts him under Trevor Lawrence. It puts him under Deshaun Watson. All of these grandiose deals that really have not truly paid off to this point. And so the risk is, yes, he's on 1 year and you probably have to franchise tag him the next year if you can't agree to an extension. But it also gives you another year of evaluation in this quarterback. And this is not just pertaining to Bryce Young. This will also pertain to CJ Stroud, who's had kind of his come back down to earth moment. Scott, I think I know it's a yes or no question, but it feels like a more loaded question than that with nuance, and you're the king of nuance. What's your take if I say the Panthers picked up his Bryce Young's 5th-year option tomorrow?
Well, I wouldn't do it tomorrow.
Right.
I'd let the thing stretch out a little bit and let it, run as long as you can reasonably. But I think bottom line is you have to do it. You have to pick that option up because, as you say, it kicks the can down the road for the really big decision, which to me is, do you give Bryce Young a $100 million contract? Week to week, you would answer that question differently. After this week, you'd say yes. After the Saints week, you'd say absolutely not. They got to move on. That's the big one there because you're tethering yourself to him much more completely. Right now, though, he's cheap by NFL standards. As you say, that still remains pretty cheap, as crazy as that sounds, $26 million being cheap, but it is for an NFL starting mid-tier quarterback, which is what Bryce is right now. He's not an elite quarterback, but he's certainly not at the bottom of the pack anymore, thankfully for everyone involved with this thing. So I would say you have to do it. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree, only because it's an advantageous option, right? Because it's below market value, essentially.
Right.
Like when you look at someone like Geno Smith, for instance, who really just came on the last few years, obviously worked with Dave Canales, but he's making $37.5 million AAB, so average annual value. That's wild. So you can get Bryce Young for $11 million less in 2 years. Oh, and by the way, he's got his 4th year of his rookie contract that he's going to be paid cheaply as well by the standard. I agree with you. I think he's a starting caliber NFL quarterback. I wouldn't say he's in the franchise echelon. Like I view like the top 12 guys in the league as being franchise quarterbacks. Like, he's probably more in that 18 to 23 range.
That's probably right. Yeah.
So he is a guy that you still want to figure out. I think what's frustrating as an observer and whether you're a fan or you're covering the team is the lack of consistency. There will be times where you see him look like a bona fide top 10 guy. There are also times where he looks like he should probably be a career backup. And I don't think that's all on him. As with anything in football, I think when someone struggles, it's more nuanced than just that person struggling. But also, like, I don't know that this like purgatory of analysis is worth taking the risk of him going off somewhere and doing the Baker Mayfield or doing the Sam Darnold. So what you could do is you could extend his tryout through year 4, and then in the 5th-year option, again, he's below market. Maybe a team sees something more in him than you do after 4 years, and you can make a trade and then move on. I think for right now, though, he's got them at 7-6. He's gone 7-5 this season, and regardless of how the offense is and who's the head coach and whatever, based on the money alone and how much you have failed with draft picks in the past and how few cheap contracts you have on the books, I think it's a worthwhile risk because it's a risk that you can inevitably alter or exchange out. Speaking of, polarizing topics, Ejiro Evero and his defense have kind of really turned the tide here. I think Derek Brown is going to be in the discussion for comeback player of the year. He's probably going to be in the discussion for defensive player of the year. I don't know if he'll win it because of the numbers. But man, this defense has really turned things around. Scott, let me give you a couple of stats. So last year, the defense allowed almost a historic amount of rushing yards because they played 17 games. But they were allowing 179.8 rushing yards per game and 31.4 points per game. This year, they're only allowing 118.7 rushing yards per game and 22.8 points per game. So nearly a 9-point difference and nearly a 61 rushing yard difference. They're also allowing 12.3 less passing yards per game. So that tells you that the passing game isn't being compromised by the improvement against the run. Like, what's your takeaway, and has your opinion changed on Evero at this point?
Well, yeah, a little bit, sure. Slightly for the better. I mean, last year at this point, we were talking about whether he should get fired or whether he just couldn't get it, wasn't going to be able to get it done here. And those were legitimate concerns with a team that had a, historically bad defense last year. I think what's happened really is that he's probably not much different. What's happened is the talent level has risen. And as you say, number one being Derek Brown, who is just such a great player. I really don't like watching interior defensive linemen that often because they're, a lot of times just in the muddle. But I make an exception for Derek Brown because, gosh, he's good. And it's just fun to watch him throw people around like rag dolls. And he's also, as you've probably noticed, Mike, gotten better as a quote for reporters. He says his mind more often now. He's not, he's just kind of coming into his own. I mean, he's a young man that's just feeling, I think, good about where things are. And he's telling the truth. I mean, he's a good guy to go to after a loss or a win, because he really will be pretty blunt and honest about what the team needs. So I think that, that's probably the biggest difference in all those numbers. But you got to give Evero credit for last week. My gosh, without J.C. Horn and Merrick, and still to be able to keep the Rams under 30 points and to get a pick six like that. I mean, that's pretty impressive. So is he going to be an NFL head coach after this season? No, I do not believe so. But I do believe he'll certainly be the defensive coordinator here in 26. He certainly earned that.
Yeah, I thought his plan worked. I mean, it wasn't a bend don't break type of defense, but he really did have to. He had a rookie safety starting in Lathan Ransom, who got a phenomenal blitz on a second down play for a loss of 8 that took them out of sequence. And then inside linebacker Christian Roseboom wasn't around. I know he's had an up and down season, but you bring up a guy from the practice squad who does have experience in Chris Barnes, and he played relatively well. So, like I said, I think this is an opportunistic defense. They are exponentially more talented. I think Dan Morgan deserves a lot of credit for the bounce back, but I also think Evero and his staff deserve a lot of credit too, because they have found a way to stop the run relatively well, where they're like in the middle of the pack from a run stopping perspective without sacrificing the passing game. And oh, by the way, J.C. Horn has 5 interceptions. Mike Jackson has 3. They've already got 12 interceptions in 13 games, which I believe I tweeted this out earlier, but off the top of my head, I don't know if I have it here. Let me double check it. Sorry. I put out a stat looking at all of their interceptions. Yeah, here it is. They haven't had more than 9 interceptions in a season since 2022. They haven't had more than 12 since 2019. So they're already at a pretty favorable mark, and they can keep going. Sacks wise, though, you're going to have to see pressure down the stretch because, one, Myles Garrett has more sacks by himself than the entire Panthers team. And 2, Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold can do some pretty good improvisation and throw the ball downfield. You don't want them to slice you up. So
I think that's the biggest issue right now. That their sack rate, I was reading somewhere, I think it's lowest in the league. Not sack rate, pressure rate. And sacks are close to the lowest, I think. But,
yes, they're bottom through.
Right. So that's the one thing where, I mean, Derek Brown is leading them in sacks with 4. I think 4. That's a bad number for somebody to – a good number for Derek Brown, bad number for – that does not bode well for your edge rushers if nobody's even gotten to 4 yet. And they've been ahead in some games too. It's not like they're always playing from behind, which you could use as an excuse in some seasons. But there's the place that I think, as you say, Baker can, we saw this here. If Baker is pressured consistently and they're playing him twice, and if he can get consistent pressure on the guy, you can rattle him. But if you can't, I mean, he can make every throw in the book, and they gotta affect Baker more than they've done, in the last couple of years.
And speaking of Baker, let's turn our attention to those final 4 games. We're resting easy during the bye week. I've never wanted or needed a bye week more in my entire career, to be honest with you. But it's not necessarily a murderer's row, but it's going to be challenging. So they play New Orleans in week 15, week 14. They play, or no, is this technically?
No, you're right. 15. Because there's 18 weeks in a 17-game season. Yeah.
Yep. Math is hard for Mike. Is the name of my book. So they play the Saints in week 15. They play the Buccaneers at home in week 16. Then they play the Seahawks at home in week 17. And then in week 18, they play the Bucs again in Tampa Bay.
Correct.
I mean, Scott, when you look at that schedule, again, they've gotten through a 13-game gauntlet with the injuries that they've had. They're expected to get J.C. Horn back. They are expected to get Trayvon Merrick back, whose suspension was lifted on Monday. They could get Robert Hunt back down the road. But the Buccaneers still have 5 games to play, and the Saints are also on their schedule. So,
as are the Falcons.
Right. So we've always said, collectively, the 3 of us, Alex, you, and me, have all said this is about winning the games outside of the division that are winnable and beating up on the division. And the issue is, I'm concerned that the Saints' loss is going to come back to bite them because the Buccaneers kind of historically have run away with this division. And they match up well against the Saints. They match up well against the Falcons, as you said. But the Panthers have that one glaring loss in the division before even facing them, and that would be my concern. That's what's going to put them behind the 8 ball, so to speak.
Well, Tampa Bay has something like the 3rd easiest schedule remaining in the NFL, and that's not great. So I think the way they have to win this division, honestly, is sweep Tampa Bay. I think that's the clearest path ahead. I do not think 2-2 will do it. You might think so. I don't know if Alex thinks so, but 2-2 would put you at 9-8. But Tampa Bay only has 5 losses, and I feel like if it's the right 2, maybe if you beat Tampa twice, maybe that gets it done, and those are the 2 wins. But I think they need to go 3-1 over the final 4, and that's a tough one. I mean, you cannot lose to the Saints again. Oh my gosh. That was their worst loss, as you said. I would say closely followed by that Arizona game where they got down 27-3. Arizona turns out not to be very good.
Right.
That was a poor loss too, but they've had some great wins to even keep them in this thing. I mean, you can't, beating Green Bay and LA and Dallas. I mean, that might be 3 playoff teams there. So all that to say, I think they've got to beat the Saints, and then they got to win 2 out of those last 3 and get to 10-7, and I think that might do it.
Yeah, and just so you guys know, the Bucs schedule is versus the Saints at home, versus the Falcons at home, then at Carolina, at Miami, Panthers at home. So
not too hard.
Not too hard. I feel like if they win 3 of these games, it's done. And so, as you said, the only way to stay really competitive is they have to beat the Saints and they have to beat the Bucks to begin this stretch of 4 games to even be in the conversation. And then Seattle may or may not matter depending on what the Bucks do, because if the Bucks, if the Bucks beat the Panthers in that game, then the division's probably over if they've won 3 straight. And so
you need that. You got to, the tiebreaker is, let's say, they could easily tie at 10-7 or 9-8. So in that case, the simplest tiebreaker is you need to, if you beat them twice, then that's the end of that, But if you split, then it goes to what, conference now? Or
it goes to division.
Division followed by conference, I think.
Right. And
that's
now,
where the Saints wouldn't hurt you. Yeah.
Right. And right now, the Bucks are 2-0 in the division. The Panthers are 2-1. So even if they lose to the Panthers once, that would tie their division records. But if the Bucks win out otherwise, then they will have a better record. So it's in the division. So it's just, this is tough. I think a lot of people dwell on that loss is going to come back to bite them. But in reality, I do think they should have beat the Saints. I thought they were outcoached and outplayed. And in a season where it's a week-to-week league, that week is sticking out like a sore thumb. And hopefully it doesn't cost them. But we're going to do our predictions next week on the rest of the schedule. Obviously, you are running away with our annual predictions column, which is weird, right? Because you predicted them before the season to go 6-11. I had them at 7-10, and then Alex had them at 8-9, and it's been the reverse order for the picks. So,
well, yeah, exactly. The good thing about picking week to week is you can figure out a little more about the the run of it. I did not think, no doubt I didn't think they would be this good, but as you say, they are quite literally unpredictable. And the easiest way to pick their games this year has been think of what they did the week before and pick the opposite. And that's often been my strategy all year, because they ping pong back and forth between looking like a juggernaut and just looking like a patsy. And so that would probably mean they're going to lose to New Orleans, right? If you go by that theory. And that'd be a rough way to start these final 4 games, because I am enjoying them being in the mix, as you are too. I'm sure it's just, more interesting around town. More people read the stories, all that stuff. I think it's fun to cover a team that at least is in contention as these guys are. They have made it interesting this year, but these last 4 games, my gosh, there's so many possibilities.
That's probably a good spot to end it on. All right, and that will be it for us this week. No cups of coffee or laptops were harmed in the making of this podcast. Today's show was produced by the talented Zach Dennis. Please subscribe and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts by searching Processing Blue. And if you watch us on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell icon to get notified whenever new episodes drop. For Scott, I'm Mike. That's a wrap.